Okay, so I can't code too long today, but I'm gonna see if we can figure out a couple more things about the original in terms of the taxi spawn. So I'm gonna be popping as many eggs as I can, not collecting them, letting them hatch, oopsie, and watching what I can figure out about the jockey spawn. So if it's the eggs on the left side of the screen there, when it hatches, I believe the taxi will come from the right side of the screen. Let's see how high it comes up. Ooh, it even came... Wow. So it came on the same Y, and same with that one. But I don't know if it's because it was random. It was... Oopsie. Goddamn. Okay, that should be a Shadow Lord. So look, if my theory's correct, the Shadow Lord should spawn from the left. And it's going to either spawn from up here, or up here on the left. I'm thinking once this hatches. And then it's going to make its way to the jockey. So yeah, it started at the same Y. And then it kind of just... Wow, so it does... Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. Okay, I've never seen a Shadow Lord actually hatch, so this might be the first time we get to see a Shadow Lord hatch. I'm just hoping the pterodactyl doesn't kill me beforehand. Because I'm thinking the Shadow Lord, since the blue Shadow Lord hatches, I think it'll be a blue. Oh, it's another Shadow Lord. Oh, and it wow, okay, okay. So it is, oh my god! The Shadow Lord's, okay. Shadow Lord's crazy. So, it's looking like the pattern is wherever the Y of a jockey is landed, that's the Y it spawns, but it spawns, depending how far on the x-axis, it spawns on the furthest side from the x-axis, and it kind of just gets initialized with a dx going towards the jockey, and it kind of just, I don't know what it does in terms of heat-seeking it. It just kind of flies randomly until it hits it. So I think it's more so a Y AI than an X AI. Yeah, look how chill the bounders are compared to the Shadow Lord. Holy shit. Okay, so white jockey, yeah. Taxi comes from the left, and it doesn't jump unless it needs to. Fucker. Oh my god. I suck at this game. So yeah, we need to make sure our bounders are nice and chill like this. And our hunters are a little more erratic, and our Shadow Lords are even more erratic. They have a faster walking speed, a faster flapping speed, and it looks like... Okay. So I'm thinking with that egg, it should be a taxi on the left side, but right about here, moving this way. Then it can bounce into these things and switch its DX. But it doesn't really jump all that much. Fucker. I really done did that to myself. Okay. I think I have enough info to at least get started. It seemed like... It seems like whatever the ground level of the egg that hatches will spawn, you know, opposite side. The taxi will spawn, but then it also has a DX going towards it, but it has platform collision detection for collidable platforms, has platform collision detection for the ground platform, as well as bottom collision for the collidable platforms. And then it's also got collision detection with the pterodactyl, but I don't think it has collision detection for other vultures. I believe that it runs through the other vultures. I could be mistaken about that, but I think that's what it is. So for today, we're going to be trying to instantiate not a taxi here, but we need to give ourselves a corresponding global table of taxis. So just like we have jockeys, we have taxis, and when we in our play state, when we instantiate all these things, we need to also instantiate our jockey, or our taxi. At the ith index, we're trying to give them those values so that we can populate our table appropriately and then only modify whichever one is being collided upon. So what other primitives to our taxi? It's an XY, a width, and a height. So we probably need an index as well, how we've been doing all of these. I don't know if we actually need that, but it'll be nice if we need it to have it there. So that we can keep track of which taxi is which taxi when we instantiate it or when we pull it from the table. Because, for example, if jockey 5 hatches, we need a taxi at index 5 to be overwritten with an active hitbox. So one thing we need to do is kind of add a graveyard to taxi, right? So we'll give ourselves a boolean called graveyard that gets initialized to true, and we only do this stuff if we're not in the graveyard. We only animate our taxi, and we only update our taxi's X and Y position if we're not in the graveyard. So if not self.graveyard, then we can do all this update logic. Okay. And then we can say else, which would be if graveyard is true. Then we say our self-x is -20 in the graveyard. Our self.y is a -20 in the graveyard. And then we take away our dx, make sure it's not moving. It won't get updated, but we want to reset it anyway. And then our dy is also 0. So now we've got a taxi graveyard implementation, kind of. So we spawn in the graveyard. So our X position will be in the graveyard. Our velocity, both X and Y, are 0. We're not updating our animation timer, but we are waiting essentially until this graveyard gets flipped to false. So when we instantiate, now we're false at the right index. We're false, and then we're instantiated with this and this X and Y. So we'll have to figure out how to do that in our play state. Because right now, so look, we'll give ourselves the X and Y and a width and a height of a taxi. So we're instantiating them all in the graveyard, and we do this so that we have a table full of taxi objects that we need for the whole wave. so that we can debug any info. If we didn't do this, we wouldn't be able to print out any info on any given taxi until it was instantiated, and that means the interpreter crashes it before you can even play a single frame. So that's why we're doing that. But we need to see, where do we get our taxi 1 here? Let's see. Where do we do our taxi 1 here? So look, we have a taxi 1 update, but actually what we need to do is update our taxis at the ith index when we're cycling through them, just like we do for all our other global game state objects. Update given delta time, and then we also render taxi right here, but we want to also render our taxi if we're not graveyard. So if our taxis at the ith index dot graveyard is false, yeah, meaning where graveyard is false, that means we want to render our taxi. So taxis table at the ith index gets rendered. So that should render all our taxis now. Instead of just the one taxi object we made but now we need to spawn it now. We need to instantiate it because before we just had it up here, right here. But we need to go to our jockey collision detection, jockey collision, and if we collide, so look right here, if the, oh yeah, it's not jockey collision detection, it's jockey spawn detection. So where is jockey spawn here? Right here. If the egg is hatched, then so it looks like we're using the hatched boolean on our egg objects to determine whether or not a jockey gets spawned, and that is also not just jockey, but we need jockey and taxi spawn because those are going to be tethered together. So if eggs at the ith index is hatched, we not only get a jockey and we take the jockey out of the graveyard, but we need to give ourselves a taxi. So in our taxis table at the ith index gets us a taxi instantiation of a certain x and a y, which we need to change this. But we have x, y, width and height, and that'll give us a taxi on screen. But we also need to set that taxi, that taxi's .graveyard field to false so that we can update its position. And then by the time we update that taxi object, it'll start to get an updated x and y. And then we flip the egg back to the graveyard. We flip it to not be false anymore so that we don't spawn more than one taxi or more than one jockey. So this should work. But here, okay, so the taxi that needs to spawn is in direct relation to the jockey that is spawned, in the sense that it's the same-ish y. You know, it's like maybe 15 pixels higher on the y. So instead of our y being 40, we can say whatever our eggs at that ith index last y is, we get our y to be that value minus, let's say 25. So like a little bit higher on the y because the egg's y is on the ground, and we want our taxi y to be not just above ground, but at least enough to get the taxi to spawn there because it's taller. So I'm doing negative 25 to get it kind of in that middle, just above the egg. So if the egg's right here, we're here. or if the egg's right here, we're up here on the other side. So we have to determine, now we have to determine the x to put in here. But we do that based off the eggs, the ith index, that last x. We could also do it by the jockey's x, because we assign it right here, which actually might be a better way to do it. Yeah, it would be the same value, but it's just a little easier to read, because we're spawning the jockey from the last egg position, and then we're spawning the taxi through the last jockey position. Not the last jockey position, but the current one, I guess. So the y gets the jockey's y minus a 25, and then we need to also say we need to ask, or we need to say if jockey's table at index I, if that x is smaller than half of our virtual width, meaning if our x is on the left side of the screen, then we would need to spawn the jockey, or the taxi on one side. So we would say, I'm going to say that this is greater than or equal to cover that base, and then I'm saying this is if jockey left side of screen. So if our jockey's x is smaller than or equal to half of our screen size, meaning the jockey's on the left side of the screen, then we want to instantiate a taxi object into our taxi table at the same index, but at the opposite side. So we would need, if the jockey's on the left side, we're spawning our taxi at the virtual width, which will be just offside the screen. But we also need to give it a dx. I'm going to say 0.5 in I here, negative 0.5 in I, and what I'm going to do here is add that this is actually a dx parameter before our and actually we can do this, we can change this dx to be used as a positive one or negative one, and then we assign it and we can give it the proper speed. So here we can say, instead of negative 0.5, we just say negative 1, meaning we're moving to the left. But then in init, we actually say that our dx here gets multiplied by 0.5. So a negative will become negative 1 will become negative 0.5, and a positive 1 will become positive 0.5. We assign that variable into its dx field. So now when we pass a negative 1, that gives it a negative 0.5 dx, which is the right speed and the right direction. And the negative 1 just means left. If it was a positive 1, it'd mean right at 0.5. So this would mean that jockey is on right side of the screen, and in that scenario we would want to initialize our taxi object at an x of a negative width, which would be 16. So we say a negative width just offside the side of the screen to the right, but we need to give it a positive dx. So if I did this correctly, whenever an egg hatches, we no longer have a taxi spawning at the very beginning, but once an egg is hatched, as soon as we instantiate that jockey from that egg, we also instantiate a taxi based on the X position of that egg, and we give our taxi not only not the graveyard gets false so that we update our X position, but we give it the proper DX and the proper X and the proper Y for the spawn, which are the 3 variables I was noticing. And then we flip our egg back to the graveyard, and then we are hatched. Which means if we're hatched, or we're no longer hatched, which means we won't spawn any more taxis than this. Then we are updating our jockeys, and we should be rendering our jockeys as long as, or our taxis rather, as long as we're not in the graveyard. And then as long as, let's see the taxis update. Yep. Yep, we're updating all our taxis. Okay, so let's see if that will now spawn a taxi out of an egg. Okay, so let's watch. Yep, dude, that's it. It hatched, and then it spawned a taxi running to it, and then we need to add... Wow. Okay. 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 That's great. That's basically what I was hoping for. I mean, other than... So there's a couple things. We need to swap the sprite's render depending on the DX. And then we need to figure out why upon a jockey collision it all goes to hell. But that's very good. We had multiple taxis on it at the same time, which we couldn't do earlier today. We had them go in the right spawn location and the right DX. So if we just get our thing rendering, our taxi rendering the right way, which if we take a look at our vulture, we have a facing right boolean, which we determine based on our DX. So we'll just do the same thing, and then we'll give it a -1 on the X-axis scale so that it flips it, and then we need to give it an offset of the width so it doesn't just flip the sprite, but it offsets it back to its original position, just flipped. So this is what we would need to do. If spawning, I guess this is just, it's a little silly that we're doing the same thing twice here. Yeah, this is totally unnecessary. But for right now, I just need this kind of logic. We'll probably need to update to fix that. Because we have to, we're rendering, right now we're rendering, shoot, I'm not going to dive into that just yet. I just want to fix our taxis real quick. So what we're going to do is say that we also have a facing right boolean so that we can determine which way we're facing. So our facing right boolean gets started to true. And then in our update, we're not in the graveyard, we're going to ask if our self DX is greater than 0, meaning we're moving right or facing right, then we are indeed facing right. Otherwise, if our DX is smaller than 0, we're moving left. So we would say self.facing right gets false, whereas this facing right gets true. And then that swaps our facing right boolean depending on our X direction. And then when we render, we need to render not just us facing right, but if we're facing right, we need to oopsie. If we're facing right, we need to render our right way, and if we're not, we need to give it a -1. So if we're facing left, we give it a -1 on the X scale, and then an offset of a self-dot width. And we're still drawing from our atlas at our sprite quad. So it should be the correct animation. All we're doing is flipping it. So now, if we have an egg on the right side, no, if we have an egg on the left side of the screen, it should make a vulture that is facing left by the time it spawns. So we'll see if that's true. Yes, perfect. That's awesome. Then I collected the jockey and disappeared, which is actually a pretty good sign, but that's a good sign. I'm gonna see if I can get some spawned up here. Yeah, I want to see where this one spawns from. Nice. So it doesn't have flying yet, but it did spawn at the right Y. So this is a great success. It looks like its DX is getting jacked. It looks like its DX is kind of getting do we increment our DX or something weird? No? Okay. Well, we've got our vultures spawning on a table basis now instead of one instantiation in our place state init. We've got the correct DX and the correct sprite rendering now. So like the basic bare bones AI of it is done in the sense that we have it spawn and head towards the jockey. That's it. Spawn, head towards the jockey. So we'll have to, by the time we end up doing the AI for it, we have to say, you know, jump every once in a while. Then we'll have to figure out how to really get it to heat seek things. But from what I can tell in the original, it doesn't do a great job. It just kind of meanders until it finds it. Because the jockey's at the floor, it kind of wants to walk so that it can walk up and pick it up. So I think if it's too far off on the Y, it'll jump, but otherwise it'll kind of wait and walk and try to just get to it. So I'm gonna call it a day because I've got more work to do, but we at least got something done. Add everything to the staging area with a commit message saying spawning taxis in global table now. Table upon jockey instantiation. And then we'll get pushed to our origin main. And then we'll code tomorrow again. I've got a cousin's wedding in North Carolina. And I'm gonna be flying Thursday, getting back Sunday. So I'll probably miss those 4 days of programming, which is okay. I'm just, you know, trying to relax with the family and trying not to have to bring my laptop and record this, but that's the reason. Tomorrow's going to be the last day of coding for a couple days, and then I'll come right back to it. It's okay to take a little break like that. It's just, yeah, I don't want to be stressing about trying to do commits when I'm out there visiting family, so I'll be resting. Maybe I'll bring my coding book to learn on the side too, but I'll catch you guys tomorrow, and we'll try to add some more functionality.